The 1990s were a seminal decade for anime, with the dying embers of Japan's bubble economy meshing with the opening salvo of the medium's explosion into the West. There are so many stories to be told and classic titles to be revisited, but today, we focus on one particular release that captured an entire generation of anime fans in the UK. Expect some strong language, because today, we go inside Cyber City Oedo.
Cyber City was made at a crucial moment in anime history. It was right at the end of the bubble economy. So the big investments, your Wings of Oniamis, your Wicked City, these huge tentpoles were suddenly less of a good-looking deal for your average investor. Also, the Madhouse studio had done very well out of Wicked City, but they had to buy the rights from Hideyuki Kikuchi. And clearly somebody at Madhouse said, what if we own something? What if we came up with a franchise of our own that didn't belong to anybody else? And so the idea with Cyber City was it was a complete Madhouse entity. And it would also be a media mix. So it wouldn't just be the three videos. The videos would be scalable, so if it was a success, they could just keep making them. But they'd also be novels that would spin off from it and a computer game, all of which actually happened. So it was a very interesting gamble from the Madhouse studio, and it was made in 1991, which was literally the year that Andy Frayne from Manga Entertainment got on a plane and went to Japan, looking for products that could fit the same kind of niche as his big cash cow, which was Akira. So he was looking for science fiction. He was looking for cyberpunk. He was obviously going to pick up Cyber City.
The first company that I went to see were the owners of Akira, called Ansha, and then was introduced to a few other companies, Toei Animation, Toho, and so actually the first sort of batch of other films after Akira were all from major companies, either the big publishing companies like Kodansha or Shueisha, or big animation studios like Toei or Toei Animation and Toho Film Company, plenty of others. And so I forget exactly, I mean, it'll be on record somewhere which year it was released, but it was sent through, I'm pretty sure Cyber City came from an independent producer. I really forget his name. I kind of can see his face, and we went out. I remember he was a nice guy. We went out partying, and I loved the look of it, and I love the idea behind it as well. And that was key and fundamental. I mean, in terms of my commercial interest in anime and setting up the manga label, a key thing was about, certainly to my eyes, the difference in Japanese animation than anything that I'd ever seen before.
In Cyber City Oedo's case, much of that style came from a name that would be instantly recognizable to many anime fans.
The big and really obvious name among the crew of Cyber City Oedo 808 is Yoshiaki Kawajiri. He's one of the founders of Madhouse, and he was right at the top of his game when he made this. He was riding high on the success of Wicked City. Wicked City really made his name because he had forcefully argued that there was enough of a market to take a relatively obscure video and turn it into a feature film and get it into cinemas. And that was a gamble that really paid off, because feature films, anime feature films, were the real meat and potatoes of foreign sales in the early 1990s. People's interest in video and TV only came much later, when all the feature films were used up. So, Madhouse were doing great out of Wicked City. They were doing great with Demon City Shinjuku, and Kawajiri himself had this very pop art aesthetic that really carried across well. He didn't object to night shooting. He was very happy to work in dark shadows, and he got around halation issues by using lots of blue. He used a very, very dark blue, which critics call the Kawajiri blue, and he would offset that with bright light shining through, but also with flashes of red, and that kind of Kawajiri aesthetic turns up in Cyber City Oedo as well. Although oddly, it doesn't turn up in his next really big film, which was Ninja Scroll. That was much more about greens and browns. He'd had enough of red and blue by that point. He's the big star from Cyber City Oedo. Akinori Endo, the scriptwriter, would go on to write more anime scripts, but he actually drifted into novels. And this element that you see, particularly in the third episode of Cyber City, about retelling stories of the supernatural, but in a more modern or postmodern context, that's basically what Akinori Endo does for a living as a novelist now. Deep down among the animators, there are a lot of long-term Madhouse people. The machinery designer was Takeshi Koike, who most famously would go on to make Redline. Technically, Cyber City Oedo was intended as an original video anime, an OAV or an OVA, depending on where you stand on these acronyms. The idea was that you could bypass cinemas, you could bypass television, you could sell direct, not actually to consumers, to video shops. It's very rare in this time for anyone except eccentric millionaires to buy that many videos or laser discs. You would be looking at a direct sale to chains of video shops. So you would sell 10,000 copies in a day to the Japanese equivalent of Blockbuster. And if your film wasn't that good, it didn't really matter because people were only spending £1 or £2 to rent it. It wasn't the rental store's problem. But if something was good, it really helped if you had a part 2 and a part 3 to get people coming back and asking for more, to sell the same product 3 times. So even though we have what is essentially a feature film's worth of material on Cyber City, it's been split into 3 parts, I think as a way of gaming the video system more than anything else.
On weekends when I was free, or, I'm pretty much not in the week, I was kind of stacked up with meetings, I would go around the video shops. And they would have the anime videos in there, and of course, in their jackets, the sleeves, so you could kind of see the graphic look. And so I would come home with, I don't know, hundreds, but on each trip, I'd have a massive bag full of videos that had cost me, each video was like the equivalent of about £100, could be even £150. So it was actually a big expense. I'd have to go through the something to declare section at customs and pay extra then on top of that. So I'm reasonably sure, I could be wrong, but I'm reasonably sure that that's how I came across Cyber City, that it was in a video rack. And then Lawrence and I would look at the videos, and you'd get, even not speaking Japanese, you can follow. Frankly, if you can't follow the storyline, it's probably, unless it's got some other added value, of which could be, extremely violent, for example, which was a big thing, even sexual content, a bit of nudity or whatever, that was kind of a big thing at the time because nobody had done that before. So that was sort of the process. Nobody spoke Japanese.
With the series safely acquired for the UK, the next task was to shape Cyber City Oedo into a form that would grab the attention of a growing audience, a process that was tried and tested by the still growing manga entertainment.
And then take something like Cyber City, they would rip out the original soundtrack, replace it with something that was a lot more metal. But then, most notoriously, they would take the dub and they would add copious bad language to it. And this was a very contentious issue in fandom of the day, because it is possible to argue that that's a legitimate approach, that if you watch a Hollywood film from the era, there'll be lots of swearing in it. And to be frank, that's very difficult to translate into Japanese. Japanese doesn't need swear words so much because you can be viciously insulting to someone by the verb forms that you use. So there is a kind of argument that you can get away with it, but manga went way over the top on their dubs, and John Walsall really embraced this attitude. He seemed to have a lot of fun with adding as many F-bombs and S-bombs as he possibly could to the anime that he was adapting.
Well, Cyber City was just one of many that came through the door, and some of them were not very good, or at least I didn't like them very much. And then there were others that I warmed to a great deal. And Cyber City, I think it's fair to say, is probably my favourite of all of them. The three films in the Cyber City series, I just, as soon as I saw them, I kind of felt like, yeah, I know what to do with this. It was a pleasure to do them. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It was always the same. There were certain journalists, I'm not going to mention them, who would. I was going to say give unfavorable reviews. That's not true. They would or wouldn't give a favorable or unfavorable review, depending on the film or the series as a whole. But they would always then, or almost always, trash the dub, and definitely always where I changed the music. How dare you? How dare Andy Frayne? I became known as 666. The devil incarnate by some of these people. How dare I? What gives me the right to think that my taste is better than the Japanese producer or director or the manga artist who created it, and la 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 la.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't think that's all my fault. I was when I was sort of introduced to this, we were looking for a kind of house style, and I can remember the producer, nice guy called Lawrence Giddis, saying, "Yeah, spice it up a bit, make it, you can really kind of go for it." And I suppose I took that a bit to heart and did go for it. So yeah, but I was egged on from the sidelines. They dared me to do it.
Okay, I don't want to buck the trend. I accept your most generous goddamn offer. Like I've got any fucking choice.
With this distinct view on how to dub anime into English, unsurprisingly, there was a unique approach to writing each script that mostly eschewed looking at translations of the material in favour of simply capturing the pure essence of the work.
No, just watch it raw Japanese and with the script in your hand maybe for a bit. I wouldn't watch all of it either to start with. I've actually found that watching it through wasn't necessarily helpful because for me, creatively, there's a certain amount of spontaneity. I don't know what's coming next. So, and things would fire in my head. If I kind of know what's coming next, you've already got a preconceived idea of what you might write. So I used to find that just getting a general idea, first couple of minutes, have a quick look, see what you're dealing with. Is this, a horror, or is it sci-fi? What is it? And then, obviously, Cyber City's kind of cyberpunk stuff, and it was that was how I do it. And then as the lines would come up, something had occurred to me. Occasionally you go back if something came up in the film that you would think, oh, but wait, I could use that or set that up earlier. I'd go back and change it, but for the most part I do it in real time, as it were, at least in screen time. Yeah.
It wasn't just the writing process that was unusual. Even the dub recording setup at Worldwide Studios, who produced them, was a far cry from modern dubbing methods.
The English dub kind of occupies a special place in my heart. All of the dubs back then that were coming from Manga UK, they were all dubbed in this one studio on the West End of London called Worldwide Productions. And Worldwide Productions was mostly the same crew. It was Michael Bakewell directing, Jill Walnut casting, and there were about 3 people that did most of their English rewrites. They all have a very unique sound to them, and they always did it so it was mostly cast with American expats and English people with really terrible fake American accents. There was usually the English rewrite was filled with British slang, so to an American who had never been to the UK, it sounded kind of otherworldly. And there was a very unique cadence to them. And I learned years later, they were using a unique device called a band rhythmo. Now, the band rhythmo was an invention of the French film industry. It was never used in the US or Canada. And what it was it was 3 strips of film. The picture, a clear film that somebody had literally had to write in India ink the entire script on, and compressed to the amount of frames that it was supposed to fill in terms of playback time, and a magnetic stripe that would act as audio tape that the voices would be recorded onto. So those 3 films would be moved synchronously. There would be a gear that synchronized them, and in the booth, the voice actor would see the picture, and then below it, this band of film scrolling across, and they'd have to just kind of read it in real time. Now, the benefit of doing this was that you saved a load of time in the studio. The studio time was very expensive. The voice actor would be able to get into the booth and just read the whole thing. They would just kind of pick it up and just read it out loud, and unless they stuttered or something, it would usually be a usable take. However, as a result, they usually sounded like they were reading. And that combination of American accents with British sentence patterns and inflections, it was a very unusual thing. And add to the practice their art of 15ing, as they called it, where they would try to get a higher age rating by filling it with ridiculous profanity. It was very unique sound, and for me, it's a giant nostalgia button. Might not be the best dubbed experience for watching anime, especially today, where we're a little more spoiled, but I don't know, it's a nostalgia trigger for me.
Around that time, I was watching stuff like The Last Boy Scout and some of the Die Hard movies and things, and it wasn't all Bruce Willis, but that was very much kind of informing my my mindset when I was doing it. Yeah.
Benton, this is my case now.
If you want this case, you'll have to take me out first.
Fine. I never liked you much. If you let the suspect get away, I'll kill you myself.
I liked the 3 characters. The characters were great, and the characters lent themselves to all that kind of snappy, tough guy dialogue, which I enjoy, which made it just great fun to do. And there was a little bit, particularly Sengoku, there was a little bit more of a sense of humor about him as well. I mean, I did Angel Cop too, but Angel's a bit dour by comparison with Sengoku, and I kind of warmed to them a bit more.
What's that saying? To make a mistake is human, but to really fuck things up, you need a computer. Ain't that right, shithead?
The building's computer and myself have been designed and built by humans. Therefore, we inherit their faults.
Ha, well, you're sure as hell right there.
I particularly like the speech at the end of the Sengoku episode, where there's the whole bunch of reasons he's not going to go to dinner, and it's raining, I forgot my umbrella, and I can't remember the rest of it.
Hey, tell you what, why don't you buy me dinner?
Because I'm tired and pissed off, and you're a cop and I'm a con, and because it's raining and I forgot my umbrella, and most of all, I'm broke.
I'll take that as a yes then, and I'll see you at 7:30.
Okay, then it's a date. I'll see you later. I've got a few things to do first.
Yeah, that I quite liked, and there were just 1 or 2. I mean, I think there's one, I can't remember which episode it's in, where they're going to get shoved in a big industrial crusher thing, and you'll be flatmates. So.
Cheer up, gentlemen. You're going to be flatmates together.
Well, I'd like to think about it. I hate being pressurized.
Nice, snappy comeback. I like it.
While dubbing anime into English was standard practice at the time, replacing the entire soundtrack was a rarer and more expensive decision to make, but in Cyber City Oedo's case, it proved to be a major source of its enduring popularity.
For me, music's incredibly important. I was a musician and, had worked, for quite a number of years in the music business. And I believe in audio in general, including sound effects and so on, but especially music that enhances the mood of the film. A good filmmaker will recognize that a film is 50% of the experience. It's as important as the picture in many cases. And the truth is, and this isn't just about Japanese animation now, but particularly lower budget filmmaking often tends to leave the music to last, or it's when the budget is squeezed. It's the thing that often goes first. They'd rather pay a lead actor, oh no, we're not going to reduce his or her salary, we'll chop the music budget in half or down to a tenth, or just use a library score. And I honestly, I find that quite extraordinary and a huge mistake, a big commercial mistake as well. So, and the same was true with the Japanese animation, where the soundtrack was great. Akira, for example, wonderful soundtrack, and they, it's clear as well. Not only they spent the money on it, but they got the right people, and it enhances the film. It wasn't a little £2.50 electronic score, on a Casio keyboard. And I'm not joking, because actually and I don't now remember specifically the soundtrack to Cyber City, but it wasn't good. In my humble opinion, obviously I'm thinking not humble, but it just wasn't good. Or work. Again, that's subjective, I suppose, but I just felt it could be a lot better. But what was clear from the start was, this is really good. It's exciting, great characters, great kind of storyline, great whole thing about it. But this music is dreadful, and it just doesn't work. So here we go. I need to change the music, and I working with a few. As I say, I come from the world of music. As a musician at one time, and then in the music business. So, I know quite a lot of people. But, we couldn't afford to spend huge budgets. This isn't like rescoring, with the Royal Philharmonic and getting Thomas Newman to write the score. So, it was largely people that I knew and had worked with, were friends with, and Rory was pretty well top of the list. I'd met Rory at uni, and played with him in a band or two, and he's not only a great musician, a very accomplished musician, a multi-instrumentalist as well, but also fantastic composer. So, and very, very importantly, he can interpret a brief. I always knew what I wanted, and I would have references. So from my music collection, there was no internet then, no YouTube, so I'd rush out something I'd heard. Maybe I didn't have the CD, but I'd rush out and get it, and then here's it is, and it's it's not necessarily the band or the album or even the track. It might be just a certain riff or phrase in a particular track that was the thing, that was the hook. Okay, and Rory was brilliant at that. Okay, I know what you want. And he'd go off and produce a sort of first rough demo, and I go, that's it, or that's nearly it. But so that was sort of the process, and to my mind, it enhanced the film.
As far as I remember, I only got a very tiny window into what the music was like originally on there, because I know obviously it had music composed for it in its initial form, and I think at some point, even after I'd started writing, I heard it, because I kept saying, let me hear some of that. What did they do? And I think Andy or somebody at Manga at the time played me a short burst of it. And it was completely different to what I was doing. I think that's why they wanted me to do it. I think they thought it wasn't right for the audience that they were going to be trying to sell it to over here and so on. So, but it was really interesting. Yeah, I didn't hear very much of it, I have to say. It didn't really have much of a bearing on what I did. I just came at it as a blank slate, really, and I think that was what they were really keen on. Andy was really into music. I mean, he's actually quite musical himself. He was a drummer when he was younger, although he'd kind of gone into the music business side of the music business, and sorry, the business side of the music business. But he had some good ideas, and he said to me, you know what, I was thinking for this, maybe there's a track by a group called Mountain called Nantucket Sleigh Ride. Now, if you're not my age, you probably wouldn't know what that is, but they were a very big sort of American band in the kind of big rock explosion of the 1970s, and they did this track, which is it's a really good track. It's got a particular section of it. It's a very long track. It's got a particular up tempo section of it that's very good. And he said, I think that might work well on this, because we'd all often talked about this track and said what a great piece of music that was, and so on. Lots of people our age would have known about it. And I said, yeah, you know, that's a really good idea. I like that. So he said, "What? Give us another Nantucket Sleigh Ride," you know. So I said, okay. So I analysed the music, you know, like you do. You just sit down, work out what are the essential elements I need to combine to make it sound and have that sort of effect. But obviously I can't steal Nantucket Sleigh Ride. That's a piece that already exists, and so on. And I don't even want to try. So I thought, oh, I know, I'll sort of work out what the key elements are, and I'll build them into a new piece. And that's what I did. I think probably when he said that to me, I said, you know what, I think for the whole of this, when I look at this, when I'd watched it, and when I watched it, I thought, you know, this has just got to be guitar driven. And in fact, fast, almost punky, I mean, thrash metal-y sort of, a lot of genres that probably exist now probably weren't really formed back then. And but thrash metal, I think, was around, a very fast, hard rock guitar. I thought, oh, that's what it wants to be. It's just perfect for this. And I said that to him, and he said, yeah, that sounds right to me. And in fact, with this Nantucket Sleigh Ride thing, essentially we were using, you know, what is like a rock band format, you know, which is keyboards, bass, drums, guitar. There wasn't going to be any singing on this because it was going to be instrumental, but that was it. So I was actually using the Nantucket Sleigh Ride steer from Andy didn't cause problems for us to do the whole score in the way I've just described. It fit perfectly, really, because that was kind of quite that piece of that music, that track is quite fast driving, guitar driven thing. So it's perfect, really. And I think that was just that was it. Once we decided that was the way to go with it, we didn't seem to be in any doubt about that. Had to be high energy, really high energy, and raw, not perfect, really raw. I actually ran a tape machine, because this was back in the days of tape. I mean, this is before computers had really taken over this whole area of recording. And so I was running a series of a tape machine in sync with video, which was a pretty clunky old process back then, but it worked. And it was slow, but it worked. And what I did was I would run the film. Let's say we would decide between us. The only guidance I got from the guys at Manga was that, look, we want music to come in here, and they'd give me a time code reference, and we want music to come out there, and that would be one scene. And now the next time you come back in with some music, we want it to start at this time code reference, and so on. So I knew where they wanted it to come in and out. Now they weren't saying I couldn't deviate from that, but we decided that was a sensible thing to do. And if I had any other ideas, I could submit them. So I knew how much each music to compose for each particular chunk. So what I would do is I would run the film, the picture on my screen, and then I just had the guitar on my lap, and I sat and I ran the recording. I hit record, and I just played. I just watched the film and I just played, and I tried to switch off the sort of conscious brain bit, the editing bit, and just react to the picture. And then I'd play back what I've done and think, right, do I like that? How does that work sync-wise? What if that came there? You know, and then I'd do it again, maybe refine it. But quite often, what happened was, it was odd. I'd found that I quickly hit something. I thought, yeah, that's right. That feels good. because it was so quick reacting. It was it was as if you were plotting it out, you see. So I didn't have to plot it out. Sometimes I did a little bit of that, but a lot of it was just reacting to the pictures. And why I liked that was that it meant that the film, I never got the music round the other way. So the film always dictated what I thought should go. And it was always a reaction to the film. And I always think, I like music when it's very, very sort of, I actually like music when it's subservient to picture.
Wouldn't you fucking know it? We picked the rush hour to chase bad guys. Fuck, eat this! Shit, there's more. Benton, sort this bunch out or I'll be late for my appointment. Gotcha, you sucker.
On film 3, because of the character Benton, I was given a steer for changing the sound a bit for that final film, and I thought this was dangerous to do, but that they seemed keen to do it, was to take, because of the character, to take it more in a kind of a club electro disco-y, well, this is back in the 90s, whatever that was then. And I thought, oh, I don't know, do we want to do that now? And I thought, well, how can I make this still sit with the rest of the films? It's still got to have that, that Cyber City thing going on. So I thought, well, I'm just going to put some disco sounds with some heavy guitars. Let's just do that, and maybe it will work. And somehow I think it probably did work. So that film I approached much more from the keyboard and drum machine point of view because of the brief I'd been given. But in the end, I still made sure it was very guitar. It still sat with the guitars, they're still in there. They had to be there, I think. I don't think it would have been safe to completely depart from that sound.
I recognize the second guy. I met him about 5 years ago and he was trying to buy some unusual drugs, if you know what I mean. But I definitely haven't seen him since then. Perhaps I could interest you in this recreational compound of my own manufacture.
Once we started, I think they gave me a deadline of it all had to be finished. The masters for the music, all 3 films had to be done 3 months hence. And so we just logically said, well, we'll work on I'll work on a film a month till I've done it. And the thing with when you do music to picture, you pretty quickly realise that the most labour-intensive jobs you'll ever do will be animation. And the reason for that is that there is no found sound, is there? If you make a film with real live characters, there'll be a certain amount of live sound captured by the microphones when you do the recording process. But with animation, everything is created from scratch, isn't it? So you don't have location sound unless you decide to impose it. So the makers of animation always want wall-to-wall music. And you're talking 40 minutes of music probably for each film. And that's quite a lot of stuff actually to come up with in the course of a month. And because of what I didn't mention was that because of the way I thought the music should sound, I thought, well, actually, I don't think we're going to have, the budget wasn't huge. We weren't going to have lots of session musicians sitting around while I gave them things to do. That wasn't probably going to work. And I thought, actually, I could do all this myself. I mean, I've got some basic skills on other instruments than bass. And I thought, I can do this. It's got to sound raw. So my playing abilities won't be a hindrance here. And I did it all myself. So it was a case of layering parts up on top of each other. But it was pretty intense, yeah. And I moved house in the middle of it, which also complicated things.
With the soundtrack and English dub both complete, all that remained was to unleash the series upon an unsuspecting public. Although, compared to the love you'll see for the series today, perhaps they weren't quite ready for it.
I had really high expectations for it, and I remember it didn't perform as well as I hoped. I think it performed pretty well, but it not as well as I had hoped. That I do remember, because I really liked it. That I 100% remember, and yeah, it was. There were, broadly speaking, in sort of commercial terms, there were kind of 3 or maybe 4 categories, let's say. I mean, the sort of top category was, something like Akira or Ghost in the Shell, particularly Ghost, that we'd invested £1 million in, and we were co-producers, co-owners, and so forth. So that required theatrical release and kind of big marketing expenditure, but they were very few and far between. The sort of, it's like the Premier Division, I guess, and there's sort of Division 1 stuff with the kind, the nearly always feature films as opposed to OVAs, and ones that, again, I thought, yeah, they got inherent high budget in production. We weren't involved in producing them, but very good high budget, and so again, it was one of those. Then there were the OVAs. We never really released series to TV series. Guyver was the kind of biggest one in terms of episodic series we did, which did actually better than I expected, funnily enough. But with Cyber City, then it sort of fell into kind of 2 camps. One that I had high expectations with, and ones which I thought were fillers, and that definitely had high expectations for me, and it did well, but not as well as I was hoping or thought that it would do. I don't know why. Maybe it just came at the wrong time, perhaps. I think it's always good to kind of reflect, and I think it sort of got to that point where, and I had started to wind back, but our schedules were getting too full. We were releasing too many titles, and some suffered as a consequence of that. I mean, we had a pretty big following in the UK, and of course it was growing internationally. We'd launched in America, that was becoming hugely important for us as a, from a commercial point of view as a company. So I was spending more time there. This isn't an excuse, by the way, but if memory serves me right, I think we didn't serve that title as well as it could have done. And I don't mean by the marketing. I think we did a pretty good job, and obviously with the dubbing and the music, but I just think it got a bit lost.
Manga Video rescored it for the UK release, the Rory McFarlane soundtrack that a lot of people really love. Central Park Media in the US had a distribution agreement with them where they would share the dub costs, and Manga Video would distribute in the UK and Central Park Media would distribute in the US for any title that they both kind of shared the license to, which was a big chunk of their catalog. When it came to Cyber City, John was kind of a notoriously cheap guy, and when he saw that they had spent all this money redubbing, he's like, I'm not paying for that. You guys just did that. So you can tell from the US release that there's a little bit of passive aggression in there. They didn't bother translating any of the on-screen text, any of the graphics work, the really nice graphics work that they did for the UK release, nowhere near the US release. It's just the Japanese video, the most zero effort credits. It's almost as if they just redid it really quick and really cheaply and just went, here you go, you cheap bastard. And that's what we got in the US. None of the on-screen text or anything was subtitled. It didn't make the same impact in the US that it did in the UK. The music might have been a part of it. The other Kawajiri stuff like Demon City Shinjuku and Wicked City did better back in the US. But it's still a great show. Looks amazing. Very stylish noir aesthetic of Kawajiri at his 90s peak. And it's a fun show. It's funny because in the UK, this was released as part of the Cyberpunk collection, which it was a line of very cheaply priced VHS tapes, 1 episode apiece of some like really violent show. It was they released Genocyber, 80 Police Files, and Cyber City on this line, and Manga Video was always pushing themselves to edgy teenagers, like, hey guys, this is just short of a constant blood orgy. Your parents will hate it. Don't you want to buy it? The US anime market was a very different crowd. It was a little nerdier, it was a little more grassroots, and we were getting a much wider and more diverse selection of anime being released here. So even though, it attracted its share of edgelords, it was a little more diverse than what people were looking for. Cyber City didn't quite fit the mold as well as some of the other shows of the era. So I think that might have contributed to why it did better in the UK. Also, it was much more expensive. Those UK tapes were like 10 to 12 pounds each, but in the US, those ran $25, $30 per volume. So those prices added up pretty quick, and as a result, a lot of people just rented, and the people that were buying were, a little older and had a little more disposable income.
Cyber City was much bigger in the English language than it ever was in Japanese. And that's partly just because of the manga video boom and the fact that it was in high street stores, not just, fanboy video shops. But also, it was one of a very lucky few of manga entertainment releases that were included in a late night TV package on Channel 4. So it had a vastly increased footprint. It was theoretically possible for 50 million people to watch it. I mean, it didn't get those kind of numbers, but it was there anyway, and people could set their videos, and people could see it, and people would go to the shops and ask for it. And that gave it a remarkably long tail in the British video industry. I was editing Manga Max magazine in 1999, so this is like 5 years after it was released. And we were getting fanzines dedicated to Cyber City. So you had Cyber Age and Cop Fiction, for example, being put out by dedicated fans who just loved this show. And in particular, they loved Ben 10. Ben 10 was a big deal for them because he was this kind of androgynous bad boy, and he had this sort of punk aesthetic going for him. I personally think his mullet was a crime against humanity, but I suppose I must be on my own there.
Get lost.
And the thing about the people making these fanzines is most of them were women. So we had this fantastic thing where this show that was really intended very much for the male gaze, very much for an all-boy audience that Manga Entertainment described themselves as the beer and curry crowd. And suddenly, over time, it's developed this really passionate female following.
My first experience of watching Cyber City Oedo was right at the beginning of me getting into anime. It was by chance seeing the first OVA on Channel 4's late license in the mid to late 90s. It was really exciting, in part because this was a whole new thing for me, and the aesthetic was very new, and all the kind of tropes that are now you recognize being familiar in anime and sci-fi anime in particular. So that was all sort of news to me, but there was also just the thrill of I was a little bit too young to be watching it, and so I was watching it secretly in my bedroom without my parents finding out. So there was just the extra adrenaline rush there, and obviously that made quite a big impression on me. So around about the same time that I was discovering anime, I also found out about anime fan club that was for girls. And I thought that was brilliant because I was growing up in a small town in Ireland, and I really didn't know anyone else who was into even other science fiction, really. So finding out that there was not only a fan club, but that it was just for girls, and that they had like a sort of pen pal system and everything set up, I thought that was wonderful. So I joined up with that. When they sent out the list of membership, they sent out membership list every time they sent out a fanzine, because they had their own fanzine as well. And it had like a big list of contacts for all the other members. And I think Vanessa, who was my co-editor, had spotted my name on there because it was like, what are your 3 favorite anime? And I put Cyber City on there. And I think Vanessa had seen that, and she wrote me a letter, and we sort of got to talking about Cyber City, and I think it was she who raised the idea of starting a fanzine. I was sort of throwing myself full pelt into fandom at the time, and I was, I was trying to, experimenting with fan art, and I was writing fan fiction, and as well, I was sort of, again, sort of this was just sort of pre-university, but I was sort of getting into sort of the textual analysis of things and just the pure joy of writing about a thing that I love. So pretty much I would sort of write stuff and send it to Vanessa, and because she would then compile everything. Vanessa is a tremendously talented artist, and she was doing her own fan comic for Cyber City, which featured the main characters that we know from the anime, but also her original character and my original character, because we had each created one. So she was sort of handling most of the kind of putting together of things, because she was also doing the comic, but pretty much I'd just sort of send her stuff and she'd find space for it. But we also, started making contact with other people who also knew and enjoyed Cyber City, and they started providing us with material as well. So we ended up with comics and short stories and articles and just random bits and pieces. And from it all, we threw together 3 issues of a fanzine. The first one, I believe, we brought to Shinenkai in 1998 to sell on a dealer's table. So we would have finished and put that one together sort of towards the end of 1997. And then the final edition, that came out, I think, while I was in my first year of university, because I remember sitting in my halls of residence at university writing stuff for this. So yeah, that would have been sort of late 1997 to mid to late 1999, I would guess.
Over 2 decades later, there may not be any fanzines still running, but Cyber City Oedo has proved to be an enduring part of the anime fan landscape, leading to Anime Limited revisiting the show for its first ever Blu-ray release anywhere in the world.
We typeset the subtitles, they look amazing now. There's a brand new restoration. The masters that we had to work with were not ideal. A lot of OVAs of that era were not finished on film. They were, made on film and then edited on video, so there's no film master of the whole thing. So what we had to work with, not ideal. But Robbie at Anime Limited did an amazing job upscaling it to HD and restoring it, and we did some final restoration on our end to tweak the brightness and make it look good on a modern HD display, and I think the end result is pretty darn close to having a good HD transfer.
And we're in this really odd position now in the 21st century, where the thing that fandom derided it most for, which is the dub, is the thing that really keeps it going now. I was there at Scotland Loves Anime in 2018 when they showed Cyber City Oedo at a late night showing, and everyone loved the dub. It was a force of great unity and hilarity that we could all laugh at these people swearing at each other. It's ironic that people who call themselves anime fans today are just loving the very thing that people who called themselves anime fans 20 years earlier thought made this absolutely unconscionable.
Well, it is. I mean, it is funny, actually, because some of the other ones, there were some that were pretty dire, I thought. And, I'm sure they'll never really see the light of day again. But I'm glad Cyber City has a life, because I say it was probably my favorite from all I did about 50 of them, I think. And they were my favorites, without a doubt. And I'm not surprised that of all of them, those are the ones that fondly remembered.
Oh, fantastic! I mean, it's such a nice thing to have. I mean, partly because I liked it myself. I thought, I liked it. If I listen back to sections of it now, it makes me smile, and I think, I like that. I might mix things a little differently. You probably think, I could have mixed that better. But generally speaking, I think it works, and so I'm quite happy to sort of stand by it. But it's very nice when other people say they appreciated it.
The growth of popularity in anime in general, manga and anime in general, is there for all to see. It was one of my favorites, and if not my absolute favorite in terms of the OVAs, I would say it probably was. But yeah, it didn't get the shot that it deserved. And so, yeah, when Rory Corby said, oh, wow, you know, I mean, had it been, I don't know, one of the more well-known titles, I'd go, oh, okay, that's understandable. But, oh, okay, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the other sort of things that I watched in the late license slot on Channel 4, and it was things like Tokyo Babylon and Legend of the Four Kings, and you know, Judge was on there, and Doom Megalopolis was on there, and you know, a lot of them quite good series. But I don't think anyone sort of harkens back to, with any degree of nostalgia necessarily, to things like Judge or Legend of the Four Kings with anywhere near the amount of nostalgia and affection that people seem to have for Cyber City. I mean, from my perspective as a fan and as someone who was just sort of, you know, running with a thing at the time because I thought it was great, I'm absolutely delighted. You know, I'm all the anime made the announcement that they were releasing the Blu-ray and it was going to have the original UK score on it as well, because I managed to get one of the CPM DVDs a few years ago, and I was absolutely heartbroken that it had the original Japanese score on it, because it's a fine score, but it's not Rory McFarlane. Yeah, I mean, I'm just so happy, and I was, you know, from the moment I heard about the Blu-ray release, absolutely ecstatic. And the fact that I'm looking on Twitter and other social media and seeing so many other people being really excited about it as well is absolutely glorious.
I tell you what I enjoyed doing was when I got to the end and I had to do the closing credits music, I thought, there needs to be something slightly sort of sad about this. It's the end, and it's got to have a nostalgia about it. And I thought, I'll do the opening theme tune, but I'll do an arrangement of it. It's completely different. And I particularly enjoyed doing that. That's nice. And when I hear that too now, I think, yeah, that works quite well.